ISS vision is to enable a digital economy, always learning, always leading. So the world is undergoing digitalization, right? The government is encouraging enterprises to digitally transform. So we are here to play a part to help in that process. Then our mission is developing digital talent through education, applied research and consulting, as well as career services, where we help to place people in jobs. So one of our lines of business is education, right? In addition to consulting and research. So in terms of education, it's practice-based in the sense the courses have a lot of case studies, workshops, hands-on. So graduate programs where you can obtain either a postgraduate diploma in systems analysis or a master's of technology, either in enterprise business analytics, digital leadership, or intelligence systems or software engineering. You can acquire all these formal degrees or postgraduate diploma either through train, that means you sign up straight away for the masters, or through a stackable program. That means you attend short courses that form part of a certificate. You collect a few of those certificates, do a project, sit for exams, and then if you clear everything, you'll be awarded the master's degree as well. So there are different pathways. Hello, can somebody ask, is there audio? Yes. Okay, then in terms of executive education, we have several disciplines which you see on the right side. So I am from the Digital Strategy and Leadership Group that's circled over there, specializing in the cybersecurity discipline. So we have other groups and disciplines as well, as you can see from the slide. And we have special centers of excellence, like the e-government leadership center and the smart health leadership center, the two squares you see at the bottom of the screen. Okay, for cybersecurity, ISS is the only ISC squared authorized official training partner in Singapore. So ISC squared owns the CISSP, CCSP, and CSSLP certification, in addition to their certification courses. Right? So ISC squared was established in 1989. It's non-profit. Okay, so in Singapore, they have brought in CISSP, CCSP, CSSLP, and soon SSCP. And NUS-ISS is the only ISC squared authorized official training partner in Singapore. That means no other organization should claim they are ISC squared authorized. Then if you hear someone says, I'm an ISC squared certified instructor, the only ISC squared certified instructors in Singapore are all under NUS-ISS. That means they deliver the courses for NUS-ISS and no other party. And it's only the ISC squared official training courses that come with official training courseware. These courseware are different from the books and other material you may find on ISC squared website. So even the books and material on ISC squared website differ from the material that's given during the official training conducted by NUS-ISS, as we are the only authorized official training partner in Singapore. Okay. So those items highlighted in red are important to remember, and feel free to spread the word. Okay. Earlier I mentioned you could either sign up direct for a master's degree, which we call through train, or you can collect certificates. Just attend short courses that make up the certificate. At the end of it, take an exam or do a project, and then you'll be awarded a graduate certificate. Collect a few graduate certificates, do a project, then you will be awarded, pass the exam as well. Then you'll be awarded the master's degree. So as you can see from the slide, there are several pathways to obtain your master's degree or your postgraduate diploma. The postgraduate diploma is also stackable. So on this slide, you see an example of a stackable Masters of Technology for intelligent systems. So each column corresponds to a graduate certificate. And within each column, you see a few courses. Some courses are 4 days, some are 3 days, some are 5 days. So these courses, a few courses constitute one graduate certificate. Okay. But in order to actually, after you attend all the courses, before you can get the graduate certificate, you have to do a practice module. Essentially, that could involve coming up with a system. So it's a hands-based project. Okay. So you collect a few of these certificates and do one project, one overarching project for the Masters of Technology, if you want to matriculate for the Masters. Somebody said screen is not clearly visible, so is everybody experiencing the same issue? Huh? Yes? Okay. What about now? Is more of the screen visible? Okay. So grade courses plus practice module give you a graduate cert. Then collect a few certs. The capstone refers to the project. Do a capstone project. Then you get your Masters of Technology degree. Okay. A few admin stuff. Switch off mobile devices. Use the Zoom chat. And there's an e-feedback form at the end of the webinar. So if you want the slides, then you need to fill in the e-feedback form. At the end of the presentation, this QR code will be flashed again. But if you want to, you can just quickly take a snapshot of the QR code now if you wish. Okay. But I'm going to forward the slide. Don't worry, later on there'll be another slide to show you the QR code. Okay, now to the content proper. Whenever you talk about AI and cybersecurity in one sentence, you actually have to consider 3 aspects shown on the screen. The 3 aspects are the security of the AI system itself. You may use an AI system to improve your business processes, for example, or your business services. Are those AI-based systems secure? So that's the security of your AI systems. The other aspect you need to consider is AI-powered attacks, meaning the black hats, that means your adversaries, may also be using AI, in this case to devise attack techniques against your organization. And the third aspect, when we mention AI and cybersecurity, is a special use case of the first area, which is the use of AI in cybersecurity. So you can use AI in your business processes to improve it. You can also use AI in cybersecurity to improve, for example, your malware detection rate. So these are the 3 areas when we talk about AI and cybersecurity. Before we actually delve into all these 3 areas, we first want to define what we mean by AI, machine learning, and deep learning. First, AI itself, there are actually two broad categories: artificial general intelligence and artificial narrow intelligence. So general intelligence essentially means the machine can do anything a human can do, which we are not there yet. Okay. Then Microsoft has some news about it. Microsoft has invested about 1 billion in an organization called OpenAI, okay, to pursue the holy grail of AI. The holy grail of AI is essentially artificial general intelligence. Then artificial narrow intelligence has improved a lot quite recently. Example, computer vision. You have face recognition being used, okay, based on machine learning or deep learning. We'll see an example later. Okay, so you can recognize objects, for example, facial recognition, or you can detect objects. Example, an autonomous vehicle will need to detect pedestrians and then decide what to do. Right? You can diagnose X-ray for maybe to determine whether or not there's cancer, for example. Then you can have motion tracking where you detect in a video clip whether there are runners, for example. So deep learning, we'll define what deep learning is later. The deep learning subset of AI is pretty good at doing computer vision. Okay, then AI, narrow AI, also used in speech, audio. Example, the smart speakers from Google and Amazon, etc. Okay. Then you can also use AI to process language. So natural language processing, for example, you may want to analyze the tweets on Twitter to see whether it's a positive or negative sentiment. Machine translation is a very common use of AI. Okay, then a very oft discussed topic of autonomous driving is also considered narrow intelligence. Okay. So now we know what AI is, there's general and there's narrow. Then what about, before we go there, so here are some examples of narrow AI intelligence. In this case, mammograms. The machine was trained to analyze mammograms. And what was the result? The machine did better than one radiologist, as good as two radiologists. Okay, this was performed in a UK hospital. So in UK, their protocol is two radiologists must analyze mammograms and come to a conclusion that can be utilized. They will not accept a conclusion from just one radiologist. So it must be two radiologists to analyze mammograms. So the machine did better than just one radiologist analyzing, and it was as good as two radiologists analyzing. So in other words, it's good enough to meet protocol, the UK protocol at least. Okay. This is just to show that narrow AI has been improving a lot recently. So that was in the medical area. Then in the legal area, this particular company, Logix, did an experiment. They had a product called Logix AI, and they wanted to showcase, okay, compare its performance against 20 experienced lawyers, review 5 NDA in 4 hours. So in total, the five NDAs had around 3,000 plus clauses. So they pitted the AI against the 20 experienced lawyers. And what was the result? the AI took 26 seconds to analyze all the 5 NDAs, and they were supposed to highlight clauses with issues, right? And the AI had 94% accuracy. That means highlighted. What was supposed to be highlighted was 94% highlighted. Whereas the lawyers took average, there were 20 lawyers, right? So average 92 minutes to review all the 5 NDAs within the time limit given, 4 hours. And the accuracy was average 85%. So again, it's improving. You have AI even beating gold champions, chess champions, right? Okay, this is face recognition at.
I want to show you a face recognition demo. I'm at Baidu's headquarters in China. Most companies require that to get inside, you swipe an RFID card like this one. But here, we don't need that. Using face recognition, check out what I can do. I'm going to walk up, recognize my face, it says welcome, Andrew, and I just walk right through without ever having to use my RFID card. Let me show you something else. I'm actually here with Lin Yuan-Ting, the director of ITL, which has built all of this face recognition technology. I'm going to hand him my RFID card, which has my face printed on it, and he's going to use it to try to sneak through using my picture instead of a live human.
Okay, I'm gonna using Andrew's card and try to sneak in and see what happens. So the system is not recognizing. Yeah. So it kind of refuses to recognize. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, now I'm gonna use my own face.
欢迎您。
Okay. So that was an example.
Pretty cool, huh? So face recognition technology like this is taking off very rapidly in China, and I hope that this type of technology soon makes its way to other countries.
The sound is a bit soft, but there are subtitles. Okay, then now we come to explaining the terms AI, machine learning, and deep learning. So AI, you have already seen. Then a subset of AI is machine learning. Machine learning is a subset of AI, in other words. So machine learning refers to algorithms with the ability to learn without explicitly being programmed. Okay, if you have written programs like C and all that, you have to actually code the logic into the program. Whereas for machine learning, you don't have to code the logic. You will just pass it data and you will learn patterns, okay, on its own from the data. So there are different machine learning techniques, so to speak. You have supervised learning, unsupervised, and reinforcement. So supervised learning essentially means you have to provide it labeled data for it to learn. So for example, let's take an analogy. You have a baby, and as it is growing up, you want to teach it how to speak. So every time you see an apple, a red apple, you point to it and you tell your toddler, apple, right? You see a green apple, you point to it, you tell your toddler, apple. You see a picture of an apple, you point to it, you tell your toddler, apple. So those pictures of apples and you telling it apples, you are labeling those pictures as apples and then telling your toddler those are apples. So that's supervised learning, okay, labeled data. Unsupervised learning essentially means you have collected a bunch of data, you just throw it to the algorithm, and then you let the algorithm figure out patterns on its own. For example, clustering is an unsupervised algorithm. So you just throw it data and then it will try and figure out how many clusters there are, and then cluster the data for you. Okay, so you don't have to label the data itself. Reinforcement learning is something like playing a game of chess. So the machine learns on its own how to achieve a particular objective. So in chess, it's actually to beat your opponent by cornering the king, for example. So you just give it the game rules and then you will try and figure out how to achieve that objective on its own. And how does it know whether it's on the way to achieving its objective or it's not, or it's going further away from its objective? There's a feedback. The learning algorithm has a feedback to inform the learning process. Okay. So a subset of machine learning is deep learning, which uses deep neural networks. Whereas for machine learning in general, or the so-called the classical machine learning, you could be using statistical techniques, right? Whereas deep learning, a subset of machine learning, uses a particular technique called neural networks, deep neural networks. The next slide will explain what we mean by deep neural networks. Essentially, it is essentially an architecture that you see on the screen there. Okay. So machine learning algorithms takes input and then it produces an output, right? The output could be a class or could be a value if you're trying to predict a value. So same for neural networks, you will take inputs. So these are your inputs and you will produce outputs. So these outputs could be 3 classes. You are trying to classify your input, then you output 3 probability values that indicate which class it belongs to. So how does it go from input to output? This is the learning portion here. Okay. So you hear the term network architecture. So network architecture refers to how many hidden layers you have in your deep neural network, how many units in each layer. Okay. The type of network, is it a convolution network or a recurrent neural network? Okay. And the picture shows a regular deep neural network. Each unit in the hidden layer is connected to every other unit in the next layer, so on and so forth. So when you say the neural network is learning, is essentially trying to figure out the weights of each of these connections. Okay. So neural network doing learning means it's trying to figure out the weights of each of these connections. And how does it learn? By comparing input and output. Okay, so if you provided an input, a labeled input, it will, based on the initialized random weights, right, you will produce certain output, right? But this output will not tally with your labeled output in the initial run. So there will be an error. So based on this error, it has to take corrective action and readjust the weights. So it does this a few times, and then eventually the output that it produces will match your label. So that's training your model. So we also have another type of neural network called convolution neural network, used mainly for computer vision image work. Then there's another type you come across commonly in literature when you process sequence data in the recurrent neural network. So natural language processing, speech recognition, all these will use recurrent neural network. Okay, so this is just FYI, introducing some terms. Now we want to introduce a concept, training versus inference, because later on when we talk about threats, the threats during training, a bit different from the threats during inference stage. So in this talk, we'll focus just on deep neural networks. So as mentioned before, what you see here is training data, and the training data is labeled. So you have many pictures of bicycles, and each picture is labeled bicycle. So you have many different pictures of strawberries, each labeled as strawberry. You have many different pictures of humans, and each picture of the human is labeled human. So this is labeled data. Labeled data means it's supervised training. You pass the data, the labeled data through the network. So if you pass a picture of a bicycle, labeled bicycle through the network is supposed to produce bicycle. But if it produces strawberry, if it classifies it as strawberry, then there's an error, right? Then that means you have to go back and adjust the weights. Okay, after you adjust the weights, then you feed in the picture again. And if you feed in a picture of human, let's say, it's supposed to classify it as human, but if it classifies it as strawberry again, that means it hasn't learned. So you have to go back and readjust the weights again. Okay, so this is iterative. So that's training. So at the end of it, a trained model means it's a model with weights. Okay, yes, the model will have learned the proper weights for these connections. And if you are satisfied with the error is minimal, if you're satisfied, then you can deploy the model into production. And when you deploy the model into production, it's known as the inference phase. So now in inference phase, if you feed it an image, okay, this image is not labeled at all, okay, because you want the image, you want the network to tell you what this is an image of. So you pass the image through the network, and then the network is supposed to tell you it's a bicycle if it has been properly trained. So this is the inference phase, where it starts recognizing images and classifies it. Okay. So far, is it okay? So far, okay. Okay. Then now with that basic concepts in place, we can now talk about the security of AI systems. We are not going to talk holistically everything about cybersecurity, because cybersecurity is a very wide area. So AI systems are deployed not in isolation, but in perhaps an existing system. So we are assuming you have already secured your existing system, and then now you want to introduce the AI component. Does the introduction of the AI component introduce additional attack surface? This is what we are going to explore. So your regular traditional cybersecurity, securing your ecosystem, your network, your applications, etc., still apply. You still have to do that. And when you introduce the AI component, you have to do a reassessment again of your risk, right? Okay, so what additional attack surface gets introduced from utilizing AI? The threats can come either during training stage or inference stage. So during training stage, remember you're using training data, labeled data. We're looking at supervised training here. You're using labeled data to train the model. Okay. So the attack will target your data, your training data. Okay. So you can poison your training data. How to poison it? you can either introduce a backdoor or a Trojan into your training data. Okay. Then there are other concerns about training data. It could be biased, or it could include personal PII data, personally identifiable information. So under PDPA, you have to take note that you don't violate PDPA. So in this talk, we will talk about backdoors. In the interest of time, we don't have a lot of time, so we have to choose, be selective. So we'll talk about backdoors. After you have trained the model, you deploy the model, right? So that's your inference stage. When the model is deployed out in production, you feed it input and then you want it to produce some output. So machine learning models are used mainly for classification or for prediction of values. Okay. So if it's used for classification, then your output will be which class does this input belong to, right? If it's regression, then the output will be a certain value. You provide an input and it's supposed to produce a certain value. Okay. Then what are the attacks or threats that can materialize here? So inference stage threats, there are a few. So adversarial examples have been studied extensively a lot, but it's still under a lot of research. Okay, no robust conclusion yet. So these two are adversarial examples. Then you could reprogram the neural network to do something else, something different from what it was intended to do in the first place. Okay. Model stealing means model extraction means you extract the weights of the model. Okay. Model inversion means given the output, I can somehow figure out what the input is. Okay, then membership inference attack means I can, by querying the model, figure out whether a particular data point was inside the training data set. Okay, then there are other attacks that span the entire supply chain. Okay, so you can attack the machine learning supply chain. The supply chain refers to where does your training data come from, the source of your data, right? All the way through your training, all the way through deployment, and the input here, where does it come from? If somebody tries to input malicious input, can you detect? Okay. Then if you train and deploy your model on the cloud, okay, so your machine learning as a service, etc., can the service provider recover your training data? And your model is deployed in an ecosystem, so it depends on other parts of the ecosystem. So the other parts of the ecosystem may have software vulnerabilities that can be exploited and then used as a launch pad to attack your machine learning. Okay, so here we see several threats, right? So we will explain two categories of threats: adversarial examples and poisoning, in particular backdoors. We'll just elaborate on these two. If you are interested in the rest, you can attend the ISS course. Okay. Adversarial examples have been studied in various domains, like vision domain, images, right? The audio domain, speech, and the text domain, natural language processing. Adversarial examples have existed for a long time in cybersecurity domain. Okay, and in each of these domains, whether vision, speech, or NLP, the example, the adversarial example, can either be digital, a digital adversarial example, or a physical adversarial example. So we'll see what that means in the upcoming slides. Okay, here you see two photos of pandas. Can you just use the chat button to reply? Can you see any difference between these two pictures? Look similar. Okay, no, cannot see the difference. Yep, no difference. Okay, yeah, that's good. No difference to the human, right? But if you, this is the original. This one is the original. You pass it to an image classifier. It will classify it as panda with around 60% confidence. Then if you add noise, okay, not random noise, but strategic noise. If you add noise to this image, the resultant image is this. Okay? Adding noise to this image here will result in this image here, which looks like a panda to the human, right? But if you pass this image to the image classifier, it will classify it as a gibbon with 99% confidence. But to the human, it's obviously still a panda, right? So this image on the right is called an adversarial example. So an adversarial example is just the original image adversarially perturbed. Okay, this is your adversarial perturbation. How is this perturbation produced? By a method called fast gradient sign. Okay, so there are different methods to produce this perturbation. Okay, so one of these methods happen to be fast gradient sign. Okay, so adversarial examples will cause your classifier to misclassify the image. You may think, oh, this is quite trivial, right? It's just pictures of pandas. But image classification is used in various areas, right? Example here. This one is a picture of growth on the skin. Okay, and based on these pictures, the specialist is supposed to diagnose whether it's a benign growth or malignant growth. Okay, so you could, this is the original image, and the classifier has been trained, right, to emulate the specialist. So given an image, it will classify it as either benign or malignant. So in this case, it classified this image as benign. So if this image was taken as a photo of your skin, then you'll be very happy it's benign, right? But what if the system has been compromised in a way and the adversary can add noise to images? So the adversary will add noise to this image to produce, this image here. And when this image is passed to the machine learning algorithm that has been trained, it will classify it as malignant, which is not correct. Okay. So this can be abused, right? For medical fraud. You go to a doctor, then they take a photo, it's actually benign. But if it's benign, you can't claim your insurance. So you add adversarial noise, it becomes malignant, right? Then you claim insurance, but you refuse treatment. Okay. So that's an example. Adversarial examples will also be problematic in autonomous vehicles where they have to recognize objects. Okay. And if you put some adversarial noise on a stop sign, the object detecting algorithm might fail to see it. If it fails to see it, then this is a successful adversarial example. Okay, so these are adversarial examples in the physical world. So earlier we mentioned physical adversarial examples. Here is another example of, this is a 3D printed turtle, but it's an adversarially perturbed 3D printing. So it has been adversarially perturbed before we send it to the 3D printer. Okay. A turtle, a regular turtle, you pass it to an object recognition machine learning system, is supposed to recognize it as a turtle. Adversarially perturbed turtle in this case has been adversarially perturbed to cause the machine learning algorithm to classify it as a rifle. So this is the adversarially perturbed one. This is the regular one. This is the adversarially perturbed one. Okay, I just wanted to show the turtle and the rifle. So you may say, okay, so is this just academic? If you think like an attacker, how can you exploit this? You want a rifle to be classified as a harmless object, right? So you need to print a adversarially perturbed plastic gun, for example. Okay, this is another example, physical adversarial example, but in this case, it's an adversarial patch. Background independent, that means image independent. So on the screen here, you see banana, right? When it is passed through the image classifier, it correctly classifies it as banana. But when you add an adversarial patch, this is the adversarial patch. After you add this to the image, the classifier will classify it as a toaster. Because this is the adversarial patch, whatever you place this adversarial patch against, that image will be classified as a toaster. So this is an adversarial patch toaster. So you can place this against any image and that image will be classified as a toaster. You can even disguise that adversarial patch. Okay? In case it's too colorful and too obvious, you can disguise it and it will still work. Okay. Again, if you put on your attacker hat, thinking hat, how can you actually use this? So you can actually put an adversarial patch on your t-shirt, right? And this adversarial patch is an attack against an object detector. Okay, let's play this video. Okay, notice the person in the gray t-shirt has an adversarial patch on his t-shirt. So the object recognition algorithm is, the machine-based algorithm is not recognizing him as a person. Okay. So you have bypassed the object detector with an adversarial patch. Notice what happens when he turns the patch over. And the object detector detects him as a person. These are, our focus today is all on deep neural networks. Okay, so all these are deep neural network based object detectors. And notice what happens when he passes the patch to the person in stripes. the object detector fails to detect. So you can essentially iron on this adversarial patch onto your t-shirt and walk through a surveillance system based on this object detector, and you will go through. They won't detect you as a person. There's only one person in this case. Okay, so I think you get the idea and how a deep neural network-based object detector surveillance system can be bypassed, can potentially be bypassed. So this is a deep neural network-based face recognition system. Suppose you are this person. He's one of the authors of this research. Suppose you are this person, right? And you want the face recognition system to identify you as John Malkovich. How can you do that? With an adversarial example, with a physical adversarial example. That's not too obvious. Okay. So in this case, what they did was print adversarial spectacles. Okay, so when Luzhou puts on these adversarial spectacles, the face recognition system identifies him as John Malkovich. So how was this adversarial spectacles produced? They just printed the adversarial pattern on paper, right? Using a color printer, print the pattern on paper, then cut out the outline of the spectacle frame and pasted it onto the spectacle frame. Okay. So now if Luzhou wants the facial recognition system to identify him as Mila, then he needs to print a adversarial pattern again, okay, slightly different from the earlier one. So same thing if Mahmoud, this is another of the researcher, okay, wants to be identified as Carson Daly, then he needs to print a correct pattern. Okay. How do you print that pattern? You solve a mathematical problem. Okay, so this is impersonation. So Mahmoud is impersonating Carson Daly. Luzhou is impersonating Mila. Okay, so in other words, adversarial examples can allow you to conduct impersonation attacks. Okay, if you don't want to print adversarial glasses, then what else can you do? In this case, a few researchers tried out projecting infrared dots on the attacker's face. Remember, this is adversarial perturbation. So the glasses are adversarially perturbing the subject's face. So you need to somehow, if you want to bypass a face recognition system, you need to adversarially perturb your face, right, to bypass the neural network-based face recognition system. So you have seen one way, glasses, to adversarially perturb your face. Another way is using infrared dots. So they mounted infrared lights on this part of the cap here. Then when you wear the cap, the infrared dots will be projected onto your face. Okay, you have to adjust it, do the necessary adjustment to trick the face recognition system. Adjust the dots, the direction, the intensity, etc. Okay. So they managed to impersonate and dodge. Dodge means cause the system to not identify you as you, to identify you as someone else. Okay. Doesn't matter who, but someone else. That's dodging. So impersonation is a targeted attack. You want the system to identify you as another specific person. Whereas dodging is an untargeted attack. You just want the system to not identify you. Okay? Can identify you as someone else, as long as you are not identified. Okay, then you may say, well, if I keep my model secret, then can people still attack the model? Well, there's something called transferability of adversarial examples, meaning even if your model is a black box, but you allow interaction, that means you allow people to provide input and receive the output from the model. I mean, most models to be useful need to allow this minimal interaction, right? Accept input and then produce a classification, for example. But it's a black box to the person doing the querying. So even with a black box, you can still mount an adversarial attack against the black box model. The model that is black box to you because of transferability. Meaning you can create your own neural network, okay, and then train it using the labeled data that you got from querying the black box, and then use the trained model to create your adversarial examples. Okay. Meaning you create your own network and then use it to create adversarial examples. How do you train your own network? You query the black box. This is the black box that you want to attack, the black box model that you want to attack. Black box in the sense you don't know what the architecture of this model is. All you have is to be able to send in inputs and receive output. This is all that you can do. So you can collect a lot of XYs, collect a lot of these XY pairs, right? By querying this model, collect a lot of these labeled data and feed it to your own neural network model. You can create your own any architecture, right? Then you train it. After you train it, then you start creating adversarial examples by adding noise, okay? Adding adversarial noise. Then the adversarial examples you create from this, actually be used to attack that black box model. Okay. So adversarial examples that affect one model, this model, can affect another model that is trained to perform the same task, even if the two models have different architectures and different training data. So this model can have a different architecture from the model that you created. It can have different training data from your training data, but as long as it's doing the same task, then the adversarial examples you created using your model can be used to attack this model. Okay. Next question is then, okay, the adversarial example attack is possible, feasible, not just in digital world, but physical world. Then the next question is, can we defend against it? The problem is a cat and mouse game. So you have researchers proposing, oh, defense technique number one. And then there'll be other researchers that say, no, it doesn't work. You poke holes in defense technique number one. And another group of researchers will come out with defense technique number two. And then another group of researchers will poke holes in it and say it doesn't work. So there has been a lot of this going on. And so far, which proposed defense technique has survived? This ensemble adversarial training. So essentially what it means is, how do you train a toddler? You show them pictures of apples that are labeled apples, right? And That's how they learn. Okay. So in other words, you need to inoculate your model against adversarial examples. So you need to show them adversarially perturbed images. In this case, you are in the image domain vision. So you need to show your model adversarially perturbed images that are correctly labeled. Okay, that's adversarial training. That means you have an adversarially perturbed panda, but you label it as panda. Okay, so you have many adversarially perturbed images of panda, and you label it as panda, so that the model learns to recognize these adversarially perturbed images as panda and not as gibbon. Okay, so that's adversarial training. Ensemble means you use different models to generate the adversarial examples. Different models meaning neural networks of different architectures. Different architectures means could have different number of hidden layers, different number of nodes in each hidden layer. You could be using different number of convolution networks, different filter sizes, etc., etc. That means different types of architecture models to create your adversarial examples to train your actual model. Okay, so that's an ensemble. Ensemble means different models of different architecture. Use them to create your adversarial examples in order to train your own actual model that you want to deploy. So as part of defense in depth, besides model hardening through ensemble adversarial training, defense in depth means it's a security concept, right? You put in multiple layers of defenses or controls so that if one layer fails, at least game is not over for you. So model hardening is one layer. Input processing is another layer. Okay. That means you pre-process your input to detect adversarial examples and then throw away the input. Don't process the adversarial example. So in other words, you pre-process the input so that the adversarial perturbations are rendered ineffective. Input pre-processing tries to render the adversarial perturbations ineffective. So there are different techniques to do that, to render the adversarial perturbations ineffective. Then runtime detection essentially means when an image comes in, you try and detect whether it has been adversarially perturbed. Okay, so this is something like in the security world, is like your intrusion detection system. So in this case is adversarial perturbation detection system. Okay, so if you want to do all this, you need tools, right? So IBM has compiled a set of tools and they released it as adversarial robustness toolbox. Other companies have also released some of their toolbox. For example, I2 has released ADV box, something like that. Okay, but the problem is there's a caveat. Okay, all these defenses, although they raise the hurdle for the attacker, is not foolproof. Okay, it could be a matter of time before the attackers find a way to circumvent these defenses. Okay. So as of this time, it's actually literally a cat and mouse game between the researchers in defense side and the researchers researching defenses and the researchers that are trying to poke holes in the defenses. So in the cybersecurity world, when you develop software, I'm drawing an analogy here. When you develop software, you want it secure by design, right? When you develop a software system, you want it secure by design. So can we also have the same thing in the deep neural network world? Can we have a deep neural network that is secure by design so that adversarial examples cannot be used against it? So recently there was a proposal by this researcher at this conference. He proposes that we need to design a new neural network architecture. And he proposed something called capsule networks. We need a new neural network architecture that forces the attacker to end up creating, if he wants to create an adversarial example, he will end up having to create an example that will be correctly classified by the neural network. Meaning, no matter how he tries to, let's say you have a picture of a panda. With this new neural, if you want to create an adversarial example against this new neural network architecture, you try to add adversarial perturbations, right? Okay. With this new neural network architecture, no matter how you add your perturbations, you will end up with an image that will be classified correctly. Okay, so after you perturb, you will end up looking maybe like a chimpanzee. Okay. Because of this neural network, no matter how you perturb, you cannot still maintain the panda image. When you try and perturb, the image will transform to not look like a panda. And the network will not classify it as a panda. It will not classify it as a panda because it will not look like a panda. In other words, this new neural network architecture is supposed to make creating adversarial examples against it so-called impossible. You always end up resembling the attacker's class. Okay, so maybe I explain again. Let's say this is a picture of a panda. You want the classifier to classify this as a gibbon. Let's say you want it to classify as a gibbon. So you try and make perturbations to it, right? But this neural network is such that when you try and make perturbations to it to make the network classify as gibbon, the image will end up looking like a gibbon to the human. So there's in other words, there's no way for you to create an adversarial perturbation that will be classified as a gibbon, and yet the image looks like a panda to the human. Okay. That is what this new neural network architecture seeks to achieve. At least that's what the researchers said. Okay, so now you know this area of research is a cat and mouse game. You let this neural network architecture exist for some time and let researchers poke holes at it and see whether it withstands attack. Okay. Okay. I need to do just a quick check. Is everything okay so far? Gary, am I on time, or how much time do I have left? Oh, I see a few no's. The no's is in reply to whether they see any difference, is it? Okay. 20 minutes, okay. So earlier you saw adversarial examples in the image domain. So adversarial examples can also exist in the text domain. So this is natural language processing. Okay, another audience participation. Can you read these two sentiment analysis? Can you read these two movie reviews? These two movie reviews. And can you just reply in the chat whether it's a positive or negative review? Both positive, both negative, or one positive, top positive, bottom negative, or top negative, bottom positive? Can oh, neutral. Okay, any other, both negative, top negative, both negative. Okay. So to the human, both look negative, right? Movie had terrible acting plot. Okay. The movie had horrific acting, horrific choice of actors, etc. So to the human, both look negative. If you pass this through a deep neural network-based sentiment analyzer, the analyzer will say the top one is negative with 78% confidence. The bottom one is positive with more than 50% confidence. Okay. So this is an adversarial example created by just changing specific words, but still retaining the meaning. Okay. These are synonyms, right? Synonyms, more or less synonyms. Okay. So this is an example of adversarial examples in the text processing area. Then again, the adversarial examples in the text processing area is not very widely explored, not as widely explored as the image area. Image area, you can find a lot of papers on it. Whereas for text processing, not as widely explored. But Microsoft and University of Maryland has come up with a adversarial training technique for NLP systems. They wrote about it. There's a paper on it. If you're interested, you can take a read. Then we come to adversarial examples in the realm of audio. So the authors actually created a website where you can actually go and listen to the adversarial examples they have created. There are two keywords here. You want your adversarial examples to be imperceptible, because remember, this is your original audio and you want to insert adversarial noise inside here. You cannot disturb the original audio. If there's too much noisy audio, if the original audio becomes noisy, then it will be detected by the human as something wrong, right? Okay. So it has to be imperceptible. The adversarial noise that you insert has to be imperceptible. And then robust, what does robust mean? if you want to attack, let's say, a smart speaker, then you must play this adversarial example over the air to reach the smart speaker across the room, for example. Right. So the researchers have found that after they introduce adversarial noise into the audio, and then they play it over the air in order to reach the smart speaker, all these adversarial perturbations get lost when they reach the speaker. Okay. So they must find a way to make sure that after the adversarial perturbations have been introduced in the audio and they play it over the air to reach the smart speaker, these perturbations are still retained when they reach the smart speaker. So if these adversarial perturbations are still retained when they reach the smart speaker, then it's robust. It's a robust adversarial perturbation. Okay, let's see. I'll leave the URL here. You can actually try to go to the website and play the sounds that they have created. Okay. So those that are imperceptible, you really can't hear the so-called noise. Those that are perceptible, you can actually hear some irritating high-pitched noise. Okay, then now we come to the threats to neural networks during training phase. One of them is data poisoning, right? Data poisoning means you want to add incorrect data into your training set to create or achieve certain objectives. One of those objectives could be to plant a backdoor. Okay. So when you say a deep neural network has been backdoored, what do you mean? A backdoored neural network will behave normally on clean input. Okay. So this is your backdoored neural network. You feed in images of stop signs, speed limit signs, and warning signs. They're all clean, right? They're clean images. It will correctly classify it. Okay? But when you feed in an image with the backdoor trigger, when you feed in an image with backdoor trigger, what is the backdoor trigger in this case? A yellow square. A yellow square is the backdoor trigger. Okay. So you feed in an image with a backdoor trigger, then the neural network classifier will classify it as anything you want. Okay. In this case, the attacker wanted it to classify anything with a yellow sticker as speed limit sign. So you can, if you don't like speed limit, then you can say anything with a yellow square, classify it as warning sign, for example. Okay. So this is attacker specified behavior on any input with this backdoor trigger. So where do you specify this behavior? During training. So how, in other words, how do you inject the backdoor into the deep neural network? By poisoning the training data. How? You train the neural network with both clean data here. So you show it many images of stop signs. Each of this image is labeled correctly as stop sign. Okay, stop sign, stop sign. And you also want to train it to recognize speed limits, right? So you show it many images of speed limit signs, correctly labeled, each one correctly labeled as speed limit. Similarly, if you want to train it to recognize warning signs, then show it a lot, correctly labeled. Okay, so all these are clean data. Now you want to inject the backdoor. Okay, then you need poison data. You superimpose the backdoor trigger on the clean image. Okay, so for example, you put all the yellow squares onto the stop sign images, and then you label them as speed limit. So this will train the neural network. Whenever they see this yellow square, it's a speed limit. So these are poison data. So far, okay. Okay, so the DNN will learn to recognize both the clean data and the trigger. That's why they can still correctly classify the clean data. And then only when they see the trigger, then they classify it as speed limit. Earlier, under adversarial examples, we saw this concept of transferability, right? Transferability. So can transferability also work in backdoor neural networks? In other words, can backdoor neural networks survive transfer learning? Okay. The researchers did an experiment. So they trained a neural network they called BADNets with clean and backdot images. Okay, this neural network is trained to recognize US traffic signs using clean and backdot images. Okay, then after training, they upload the trained backdoor model to some public repository. So anybody that's interested in a neural network that recognizes traffic signs can download it and then retrain with their own country's traffic sign. Because this model was trained on US traffic sign, but you can actually use that model and then retrain it with your own country's traffic sign. So for example, maybe someone in Sweden downloads the model and then trains it with Swedish traffic signs. He's not an attacker, he's a real user, right? So he will be training it with clean Swedish traffic signs. So taking an existing model and retraining it with your own data is called transfer learning. So your models may have several layers, right? Your neural network architecture may have several layers. So transfer learning means you download the trained model. Maybe you drop off the last 2 layers, add in your own 2 layers, and then retrain with your own data. Okay, so in this case, they downloaded the model, kept the first part, the earlier part, which is the convolution layers intact, and then they dropped the later parts, the later layers, and put in their own fully connected layers. These are the layers at the later part of the network, and then retrain it with Swedish traffic signs. Remember the original model was backdoor. So can the backdoor survive this retraining? Yes. Okay, let me erase all this. Yes, the backdoor can survive the retraining. So if you stick a yellow square on a Swedish traffic sign, it will trigger the backdoor behavior. In other words, you stick a yellow square on a Swedish stop sign, it will classify it as speed limit. Okay, so what's the moral of the story here from a cybersecurity perspective? If you reuse other people's model to retrain with your own data, you have to somehow make sure it's not a backdoor model, right? This is another example of a backdoor neural network. In this case, is physical implementation facial recognition system. Okay, so while they were training this facial recognition system, the data has been poisoned, and the trigger is this particular pair of spectacles. It has to be this pair, this shape, this color, this orientation. Okay. So this backdoor trigger was inserted in the, let me shift, I think. Okay, so this backdoor trigger was inserted during training. So they poisoned the training data. So anyone wearing this will be recognized as this person. Okay. So you have one person wearing this pair of glasses, the backdoor trigger glasses, and this person also wearing this backdoor trigger glasses. So whoever wears that backdoor trigger glasses will be identified as this person. This was what the facial recognition was trained to do during training with the poison data. Whenever you see this, classify as this. Okay, it was trained to do that with the poison data. So if you wear spectacles, but they are not the backdoor trigger spectacles, you will be identified normally. That means the facial recognition system will behave normally. Okay. So now, is there a way to detect whether a model has been backdoored? Let's say you go to a repository, you download a model. Some people have attempted to figure out techniques to identify backdoors in models. Some are listed here. Okay. And okay, I'll just explain the concept behind neural cleanse. So neural cleanse actually this technique actually tries to do several things. It tries to detect the backdoor in the neural network itself. Okay. And they also try to identify which is the backdoor label. Okay. So whenever you see a trigger, you classify as this. This is your backdoor label. Okay. In the traffic sign case, whenever you see a yellow square, you classify as speed limit. So this is your backdoor label. So the first step is try to detect whether there is a backdoor label. The backdoor label will have a different characteristic from a normal label. Okay. Then based on that, they will try and reverse engineer the backdoor trigger. It means I know this is the backdoor label. Then what is the trigger that causes an input to be labeled as this backdoor label? Once they can figure out what the trigger is, then they can neutralize it by removing it from the neural network. Okay. The exact technique is etc. is described in the paper. So after hearing all this, hopefully you get the sense that security is actually one of the biggest challenges in deploying AI. So adversarial examples is still an active area of research. Backdoors, Trojans, a lot of various attacks are currently still active area of research. So security of AI systems is not as mature as, let's say, security of an application system, where people have identified, let's say, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, etc., as potential threats to software systems, web-based software systems, and they know how to neutralize it. For example, SQL injection, to protect against that, you do parameterization, right? Then to protect against cross-site scripting, you do output sanitization. Tested and proven, but in the AI world, it's a cat and mouse game, right? So things are still under active research. Not a lot of tested and proven techniques yet. Okay. if you are interested in learning more, consider, I'm not saying you must attend, consider attending ISS courses to know more about this. Meanwhile, we leave you some food for thought. If you are deploying AI systems, then you might ask yourself all these questions. Okay. Training data, you must make sure your training data is not poison. That's a very important step in your machine learning supply chain, your training data. And then during inference stage, remember there's this attack called neural network reprogramming. So you need to monitor to make sure the attackers are not subverting or doing something to your model. Okay. The second aspect is AI-powered attacks. In a sense, the black hats are also utilizing AI. In which area? Deepfake videos and impersonating somebody's voice to trick somebody into doing something. Okay, and using GANs to actually bypass security controls. Okay, we'll see for each of these, there are subsequent slides to explain it, to give examples of it. So deepfake voice, okay, somebody actually used a deepfake voice generator to impersonate the CEO and then asked the employee. So the attacker impersonated the CEO of the parent company to trick the CEO of the child company to transfer funds to a particular account. And so the victim was tricked into transferring that much euro or that much US dollars to an account owned by the attacker. Okay. So that's deepfake audio. Then you have deepfake videos. Just a caveat here, this video may have some rough language, rough phrases to illustrate the point. So I will stop the video before. There's one part where I can't stop because it illustrates the point. And I will stop the video before the end where there's a flurry of rough phrases. Okay, can everyone see the video?
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things. So, for instance, they could have me say things like, I don't know, Killmonger was right, or Ben Carson is in the sunken place, or, how about this, simply, President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. Now, you see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele. This is a dangerous time. Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet. That's a time when we need to rely on trusted news sources. It may sound basic, but how we move forward.
Okay, but you get the idea. Deepfake. This video is not that recent. It's one of the earlier videos showing deepfakes. Okay, but it illustrates the point. And nowadays it's quite easy to do deepfake videos. There's even an app where you can just swap. You have an existing video, you just swap your face into the subject's face in the video. Okay. And it can also be as simple as keying in what you want the person to say. Okay. So deepfake, in other words, the message is deepfake videos are quite easy to create nowadays. Then the problem is deepfake videos are not easy to detect. Okay. So there's actually a deepfake detection challenge going on now. You can Google for deepfake detection challenge. Going on now is supposed to close by end of March. Then all the deepfake detection algorithms will then be judged and see which one is good at detecting deepfakes. Okay, now I have again another audience participation. You see 4 pictures on your screen, right? Which person is fictitious? Can you just use the chat and then key A, B, C, or D? Which person is fictitious? Oops. A, or plot twist, all 4. C, all 4. Yeah, actually all 4 are fictitious. It was all these images, but they look real, right? It was all these pictures was generated from this website over here. So you can just go to this website, and each time you hit the website, you generate a new picture. But that person doesn't exist. How were all these pictures generated? Using a neural network architecture called GAN. Okay. So you can use it to generate fictitious images, and then now you want to create a fictitious account on Facebook. You need a picture, you can come here and generate a picture. Okay, so people have used GANs to create adversarial malware, malicious software that will be classified as benign by your anti-malware software. Okay, so they called it malGAN. And some have used GAN to create a password generator. Okay, to create high probability passwords. The input for this to train this, the input to train this passGAN, they use the, whenever attackers breach the organization's database, they will publish the passwords in some dark website, or even in some websites like Pastebin, etc. So they collected all this and then used it as input to train the passGAN. So if that's the case, then the password they generated will sort of model the distribution of those compromised password repositories. Okay. And hopefully you get a higher chance of hitting the right password without going through exhaustive search, in other words. Okay, then there are other examples of AI-powered attacks listed here. There's one AI-powered malware which IBM created and talked about at Black Hat 2018. They call it DeepLocker. If you're interested, you can. They actually have a talk on YouTube. Their talk is actually published on YouTube, so you can actually Google and search for it if you're interested. And in DEF CON, another researcher explained how he used reinforcement learning to bypass the next-gen antivirus. Okay. In other words, if you're trying to figure out how AI can be used by black hats, you just put on your black hat and try and think like an attacker. How can the attacker harness AI to attack your organization's assets? Okay. So this is part of your analyzing threats during your risk assessment. Finally, the use of AI in cybersecurity. Nowadays, when cybersecurity product vendors come to you, they always tout, oh, I use AI in my products, right? Okay. So how is AI used in cybersecurity? Well, for malware detection, all the anti-malware product companies will say they use AI. So that could be one area of use. Okay, to identify spam, to curate threat intelligence. If you subscribe to many threat intelligence feeds, it's going to come in. It'll be lots and lots of volume. So how do you make sense of it? Okay. So you can use machine learning to help you. Machine learning can also automate tier 1 analyst response. So if you have playbooks, you can automate the playbooks. You know, the response playbooks. Okay, then it can also be used to analyze user and entity behavior to detect anomalous behavior. And it does help. Not that it does create some improvement. Okay, but of course you must be aware it may not be robust. Not robust means could potentially be bypassed. So DEF CON in 2019 organized a competition. They gave the participants around 50 files, and they wanted the participants to make sure these 50 malicious files can bypass machine learning based antivirus software. Okay? And people succeeded. Of course, actually, they could succeed because one of the machine learning based algorithm had a flawed implementation. So it's an implementation flaw rather than an inherent machine learning vulnerability. Okay. But there were 3 models they need to bypass. So one of them had an implementation flaw. Okay, so they use the flaw to bypass. So that doesn't really qualify as bypassing the machine learning portion of it. But the other 2, they bypass the machine learning portion of it. Okay, then recently Skylight actually bypassed a commercial anti-malware software, AI-based anti-malware software. Okay, I blanco the product name out in case it's sensitive, etc. But you have enough clues to do your detective work. Okay, so the author in this particular blog post described how he bypassed the machine learning based malware detector. If you're interested, you can read the blog post. And at the end of it, he had some so-called advice. Okay, don't use just AI alone for your anti-malware detection. Okay. Use a hybrid approach. The AI and machine learning portion of it can help you detect the unknowns, okay? Meaning those you do not have the signature for. Okay. But don't use just AI alone. You need to also verify with your tried and tested classical techniques like signature-based detection. Okay. So this is using a hybrid approach is aligned to a particular principle in security called defense in depth. Defense in depth. So if Sometimes you cannot help it. You purchase a anti-malware software and then the vendor actually uses AI within the software, right? So sometimes you actually purchase a dedicated AI-based cybersecurity solution. So if you do, then here are some questions which you may want to ask. Remember, data is very important. So you must ask them what data they use to train the model, and especially important is data source. How do they ensure the training data hasn't been poisoned, right? Then another thing is you cannot have a super model to detect all sorts of different attack behavior. You need one model trained to detect a certain type of behavior. If you have another type of behavior, then you might have to train another model. For example, maybe you want to detect data exfiltration. You train a model to detect, for example, data exfiltration. And maybe you train another model to detect Tor traffic, for example. Okay, so there's no supermodel that can detect everything. So if that's the case, then how many different models do they have, right? Then the important thing is, how do they know their AI-based solution is performing as expected? How do they know whether an adversary has already subverted it, right? So these are some of the major questions you need to, you may want to pose to your suppliers. So that's if you purchase your AI-based solution. What if you want to build your own model? Before you even start doing that, you need to ask yourself a few questions. What cybersecurity problem are you trying to solve? That if you don't solve it, it will hinder the organization's mission. Remember, we don't do security or AI just for the sake of AI or security. It must be aligned with your organization's mission, and it's help it to achieve its mission, right? So if you do have a cybersecurity problem that if you solve it can remove the hindrance to your organization's mission, then the next question is AI or machine learning the appropriate solution? If it is, do you have the necessary data? Because machine learning needs data to do its job, to learn, right? Let's say you have the data, then do you have the necessary expertise? You need both cybersecurity and data science expertise. Very difficult to find a person with both, so you may have to work collaboratively, put your cybersecurity experts and your data science experts in a team. After you have created, you need to maintain the model. Can you commit the resources, the manpower to maintain the model? Okay. So in summary, hopefully the message you take away is, if you are deploying AI systems, you need to be aware of its security. Okay, so as we have seen, security of AI systems is still an active area of research. So if you still want to deploy AI systems, then you might have to put in compensating controls to make sure attackers cannot subvert your AI system. And the flip side of the coin, AI-powered attacks and malicious use of AI, you have to consider that as part of your cybersecurity risk assessment. With that, that's the end of the session.